I still don't talk about this often. Not because people wouldn't believe me, but because every time I replay it in my head, it feels like I'm right back there. Back in that house. Back in the silence. Back in the moment when I realized I was never alone. This happened in 2017 when I moved to a small rural town in southern Illinois, the kind of place where cornfields stretch farther than cell service, and the loudest sound at night is the wind dragging itself through trees. I was 22 years old, single, working remotely, and painfully introverted. The town population leaned heavily toward retirees and farmers who'd lived there their entire lives. I didn't fit in. I barely existed. The only person I knew was a coworker I'll call Marissa. She felt bad for me, the quiet new girl living alone in a rented duplex on the edge of town, and tried to help me meet people. That's how she introduced me to Harold and Denise Walker. They were an older couple, early 50s, lived just outside town on a wooded property. According to Marissa, they were a little odd but harmless, and were looking for someone to dog sit for a week while they traveled out of state. She framed it as a win-win: extra money, company, connections. I agreed to meet them. Their home sat off a narrow rural road, hidden behind tall trees and a long gravel driveway. It was a 1970s brick ranch, the kind that once screamed middle-class comfort, but now felt tired and forgotten. The bricks were cracked in places. The porch sagged slightly. The paint on the trim had peeled back like old skin. I didn't mind. I'd spent years exploring abandoned buildings and forgotten places. This house felt familiar in that way, like it had stories it didn't want to tell. The dogs were friendly. 2 medium-sized mutts, older, calm, clearly well-trained. The couple, though, they were polite, but something was off. When I spoke, they didn't maintain eye contact. Instead, they scanned me, slowly, deliberately, from my shoes to my face, like they were assessing an object rather than listening to a person. During the house tour, they barely spoke. Denise would open a door, step aside, let me look, then close it. No explanations, no small talk, just doors opening and closing. I noticed cameras everywhere, outside, hallways, living room, kitchen, office, garage, backyard, driveway, even pointed toward the kitchen table. When I asked, Harold casually mentioned they sold firearms as a side business and needed surveillance for insurance purposes. It made me uneasy, but I ignored that feeling. I wanted the money. I wanted connection. I wanted to believe this town wouldn't chew me up and spit me out. So I agreed. They left early the next morning. I moved in with my laptop, clothes, and groceries. I set up my workspace in their home office, where a monitor displayed live feeds from the exterior cameras. It actually helped. Being alone on a large wooded property in the middle of nowhere can mess with your head. Seeing the driveway, yard, and tree line gave me comfort. The dogs had a doggy door leading to a fenced backyard that backed straight into the woods. They could come and go as they pleased. The first night passed without incident. I slept well. That would be the last time. On the second night, around 10 p.m., I noticed something odd. One of the driveway cameras had gone offline. Rural internet is unreliable, so I brushed it off. But something about it bothered me. I stood up to check. As I approached the back door, the dogs suddenly launched themselves off the floor, scrambling frantically through the doggy door, barking like I'd never heard before. Not playful barking, not territorial barking. This was panic. They ran straight to the same section of fence, the one bordering the woods, and barked non-stop. I stepped outside and scanned the darkness. Nothing. No movement. No sound. Just trees. I felt stupid. Horror movies had already done enough damage to my imagination. I lured the dogs back inside with treats, blocked the doggy door with a heavy wooden chair, and went to bed. The next morning I overslept. When I woke, the house was silent. Too silent. The dogs weren't at the foot of the bed like usual. I called their names. Nothing. I walked to the back door. They were outside, calmly roaming the yard. That's when my stomach dropped. I turned slowly. The chair, the one I'd shoved against the doggy door, was now sitting in the corner of the room, several feet away. My hand started shaking. There was no way those dogs moved it. I called Marissa immediately, barely holding it together. She came over and helped me search the house. Every room, every closet, every corner. Nothing. She gently suggested maybe I misremembered where the chair was. I wanted to believe her. So I stayed. The cameras go dark. The next day passed quietly. Too quietly. That night, as I sat in the office, I glanced at the monitor. Every camera feed was offline. All of them. My heart sank. I texted Denise, mentioning the cameras and offering to troubleshoot. No response. It was close to midnight when the dog suddenly jumped up again and ran to the doggy door. I grabbed a kitchen knife and followed. They barked briefly, then stopped. That's when I heard it. A thump. Not inside. Outside. On the other side of the house. I froze. I got the dogs inside, blocked the door again, and took a photo this time, just to prove to myself I'd done it. I walked toward the back room, and then, that feeling. The air felt different. Thicker. Like the silence was holding its breath. I whispered, "Who's there?" Nothing. I locked the door to the room and sat in the living room with the dogs, knife in hand. 20 minutes passed. Then my phone buzzed. Denise. "Hi, don't worry about the cameras. You're safe." I hadn't mentioned feeling unsafe. Another text came through. "Can you check if I left the garage door open to the inside? I don't want anything getting in." The garage door was in the back room, the room I'd just locked. I didn't respond. Then another message. "I see you're awake. Please check." That's when it hit me. They were watching me. Against every instinct, I unlocked the door. I opened it slowly, stretching my arms out to keep distance. The room was dark. The garage door stood open. As my phone lit up with another notification, the faint glow revealed something pressed against the wall. An arm. Human. I ran. I slammed the door shut, grabbed my keys, and bolted out the front door. As I started my car, the garage door began opening. My headlights flooded the garage. A man squatting behind a box, watching. I floored it. The police found nothing. No forced entry, no suspect, no explanation. At 3 a.m., Denise texted. "Plans changed. We're coming home early. You can leave." As I drove away, I saw a car pull into their driveway. I texted her. She replied instantly. "I know." They were never gone. I'm 30 now. I'm safe. But some nights, silence still feels wrong. And whenever I see security cameras, I wonder who they're really for. I've worked a lot of jobs in my life, but nothing ever stayed with me the way this one did. Even now, years later, I still catch myself scanning corners of crowded rooms, still feeling uneasy when someone sits too quietly for too long. There's something about that night that never fully left me, like a stain you scrub at until your hands are raw, but it never quite fades. This happened while I was working as a bartender at a bar restaurant in a suburb just outside Baltimore, Maryland. It was one of those places people loved, even though, objectively, it wasn't anything special. The drinks were decent, the food was average, but the energy kept people coming back. The layout of the place is important to understand, because without it, nothing else will make sense. There were no servers, no wait staff, just bartenders like me and the cooks hidden behind the kitchen doors. If customers wanted food, soda, water, or alcohol, they had to order everything directly at the bar. When their order was ready, they walked over to the pickup counter themselves. It kept things fast, loud, and constantly moving. Management claimed it was a unique system. In reality, it was cheap. But I didn't mind. I actually liked the chaos. I thrived in it. The bar area was always packed, music blasting from a DJ booth near the front, bass vibrating through the floor. There was a standing area near the booth where people danced, shouted over the music, and spilled drinks without apology. On busy nights, it felt like controlled madness. That particular night was a weekend, which meant the place was slammed before the sun even finished setting. By 9 p.m., the bar was wall-to-wall people. It was a younger crowd that night, mostly college-age kids from nearby campuses. That usually meant louder music requests, more dancing, more tequila shots, and, unfortunately, worse tips. A group of guys kept ordering rounds of tequila faster than I could salt the rims. One of them was so drunk, he used the same pickup line on me 3 separate times, each time acting like it was the first. I was in full autopilot mode. Pour, wipe, shake, repeat. That's when I noticed them. An elderly couple had walked in and taken the corner booth on the restaurant side of the building, away from the bar and dance floor. At first, nothing about them stood out. I just thought it was strange that 2 people that age would willingly step into a place this loud and crowded. But I shrugged it off. People surprise you sometimes. I went back to work. Time moves weirdly when you're behind a bar. 30 minutes can feel like 10 seconds or an entire hour. At some point, I'd guess maybe 45 minutes after they arrived, I noticed the couple again. My hands kept moving, lining up glasses, pouring gin and tonics, sliding drinks across the bar. Muscle memory took over. But my brain wouldn't let them go. They were still sitting there. They hadn't ordered anything. No food, no drinks, not even water. I would have remembered. That was literally my job. As I watched more closely, something else felt off. They weren't talking. They weren't looking at each other. They were both staring at the wall beside their booth. Not above it, not past it. At it. Completely still. Like mannequins someone forgot to move. Eventually, the rush slowed just enough for me to step away. I figured maybe they didn't understand how the place worked. Maybe they were waiting for a server who was never coming. I grabbed a menu and walked over, putting on my customer service smile. As I approached the table, neither of them reacted. No glance, no shift in posture. Nothing. I cleared my throat and asked politely if they wanted anything to eat or drink. The woman didn't move at all. Not even a blink. The man, however, turned his head slowly, unnaturally slow, like each movement required effort. When his face fully came into view, I felt a chill run through my entire body. His skin looked pale and thin, stretched tightly over sharp features. His eyes were sunken, dark and unreadable, like they didn't quite belong in his face. He didn't speak. He just shook his head once. Firm. Silent. Something about the way he looked at me made my stomach twist. I muttered a quick, "All right, let me know if you need anything," and walked away faster than I meant to. My hands were shaking when I picked up the next glass. I tried to forget about them. I really did. But every time I turned my head, my eyes drifted back to that booth. They didn't move. They didn't talk. They didn't leave. At one point, when the music dipped between songs, I swear the silence around their table felt heavier than anywhere else in the room, like sound itself refused to linger near them. Eventually, I forced myself to focus on work. Then, when things finally slowed near closing time, I looked over again, and my heart nearly stopped. They were both staring directly at me, not scanning the room, not watching the crowd. Me. The woman's eyes locked onto mine, unblinking. I looked away immediately, pretending to wipe the bar, my pulse pounding in my ears. When I glanced back again a moment later, the booth was empty. Relief washed over me so suddenly, I had to steady myself. By the end of the night, I was exhausted but still unsettled. As we wiped down the bar and locked up, I mentioned the couple to my coworker, a veteran bartender who prided herself on noticing everything. She frowned. She said she had no idea what I was talking about. I described them in detail. She shook her head and laughed, joking that maybe I'd had one too many drinks myself. Then she listed off, from memory, a dozen customers who'd ordered food that night, what they wore, where they sat, what they drank. Her memory was flawless. My stomach sank. When we finally locked the doors, I walked to my car. That's when I saw them. Across the street, under a single flickering streetlight, stood two dark figures, side by side, watching. I didn't breathe. I didn't think. I ran. I threw myself into my car, locked the doors, and peeled out of the lot without looking back. I never saw them again. No explanation. No answers. But sometimes, when the bar gets loud and crowded, I still glance toward empty booths, half expecting to see two figures sitting silently, waiting for something they never planned to order. I'm going to start this by saying that some details might be slightly off. Not because the story isn't real, but because it isn't mine. This is something my best friend told me years ago, late at night, more than once. Every time he told it, his voice got quieter, more careful, like saying the wrong thing might bring something back. It's one of those stories that doesn't fade with repetition. If anything, it gets heavier. The kind that sits in the back of your mind and changes how you look at certain places. For me, that place became deep forest. My friend's father, I'll call him Ray, worked as a tree saw operator in the Pacific Northwest, Oregon and Washington Territory. Remote logging sites, high elevation, miles away from anything resembling civilization. For anyone who doesn't know, a tree saw isn't a chainsaw. It's a massive industrial machine designed to cut through trees that have been growing for decades. It grips, slices, measures, and drops them with brutal precision. Ray was good at his job. Too good. Loggers like Ray weren't paid hourly. They were paid per tree. That meant the faster you worked, the more you earned. And Ray pushed himself harder than most. 16-hour days, sometimes 20. Sleeping in a camper, eating whatever he could heat up over a small stove. He worked alone about half the time. The other half, he worked with another saw operator named Colton. The two of them usually operated on opposite ends of a job site, communicating through handheld radios. Out there, radios weren't just for coordination. They were lifelines. A few years before my friend told me this story, Ray and Colton were assigned to a new job site high up on a mountain, so remote it took the company over 3 weeks just to clear a road wide enough for equipment to reach it. By the time they arrived, they were deep into territory that didn't feel touched by the modern world. No towns, no trails, no signal, just trees, fog, and silence. They were already 10 days into the job, making good progress, when the radio started acting strange. At first it was just noise, faint chatter beneath the static, muffled, fragmented, like someone talking through water. Ray assumed it was interference, maybe another crew working miles away, their signals bleeding through. It happened sometimes, but then Colton radioed him. "Hey, you hearing that too?" They switched channels. The voices followed. They switched again. Still there. That shouldn't have been possible. Standard radios don't work that way. You don't just carry interference with you across frequencies. As the days went on, the voices became clearer. Not full sentences, just fragments. 2 men. Casual tone, talking about mundane things. Collecting water, moving supplies, making a fire. The content wasn't threatening, but the context was wrong. No one else was supposed to be up there. Then they started finding evidence. A crushed plastic bottle near a stump. Footprints where there shouldn't have been any. A makeshift fire ring, long cold. The higher they moved up the mountain, the more signs appeared. None of it made sense. This wasn't public land. It wasn't accessible. You couldn't hike here. You couldn't just wander in. One afternoon, Colton called Ray over to a narrow trail just off the main work zone. There was a tent, partially concealed by brush. They debated for a long time before checking it. Inside, they found a single sleeping bag and a duffel bag. What was inside that bag haunted Ray for the rest of his life. Not graphic, but unmistakably wrong. Children's clothing, restraints, crude drawings no sane person should ever make, and food that was still fresh. Whoever had been there hadn't left long ago. Colton wanted to pack up and leave immediately. Ray didn't. Ray was stubborn, always had been. He told Colton that abandoning the job without proof would cost them both their pay. That maybe they were overreacting, that calling attention to themselves might make things worse. They compromised. Radio use would be limited to emergencies only. They would finish the job quickly and leave. That night, they sat in the camper in near silence, the weight of what they'd found pressing down on them. Then the radio crackled to life. This time, the voices were clear. 2 men, talking calmly, about gathering firewood. Ray felt sick. These weren't random hikers. These were the people connected to that tent, and they knew how radios worked. The next night, Ray couldn't take it anymore. When he heard the men talking again, casually, like neighbors chatting over a fence, something snapped. He grabbed the radio and demanded to know who they were and what they were doing on the mountain. The response was immediate. Silence. The radio went dead. Colton was furious. Ray had just announced their presence, made them visible. They argued quietly before agreeing to deal with it in the morning. Neither of them slept. Around midnight, Colton shook Ray awake. Someone was outside. They both heard it. Footsteps on gravel. Slow, deliberate. Ray reached for his gun and felt his stomach drop. It wasn't loaded. He couldn't remember where the ammunition was. Colton didn't have a weapon at all. Calling the police was pointless. They were hours away from the nearest town. The camper door handle jiggled, then creaked open slightly. The camper was raised off the ground. No ladder, no stool. Something scratched along the door. Long, intentional. 4 minutes passed. Finally, Ray nodded at Colton and moved toward the door with a flashlight. The door exploded inward. Pain, impact, chaos. Ray was struck across the face and fell out of the camper, hitting the ground hard. A man was on top of him, pressing a blade against his throat. Another man appeared and kicked him repeatedly. Colton didn't hesitate. He tackled the man with the knife. The second man ran. The first scrambled free. They disappeared into the forest. Ray barely made it to the truck. They drove 2 hours to the nearest hospital. Ray's face was badly injured. A deep cut across his eyes permanently damaged his vision. One pupil never returned to normal. They reported everything. Nothing came of it. 2 weeks later, when the rest of the crew arrived to finish the job, a co-worker was found dead in a ditch. Bound, silenced, murdered. No arrests were ever made. Ray lives with the aftermath. PTSD. Nightmares. A damaged eye that reminds him every day. My friend hasn't talked to him in years, and I've never walked into deep woods the same way again. Because out there, you don't have to imagine monsters. Sometimes they're already listening. This happened last summer. I was 20 years old at the time, old enough to think I knew how the world worked, young enough to believe nothing truly bad could happen to me. My name is Kevin. This isn't one of those stories that starts with something obviously terrifying. No screams, no blood, no immediate danger. It started with comfort, privilege, and a sense of safety that only comes when you're somewhere you believe nothing can touch you. My friend James came from money, not the kind people casually brag about, but the kind you don't even notice unless you know what to look for. His father was some kind of high-level intellectual property lawyer who did contract work tied to the US government. I never fully understood it, and honestly, it didn't matter. What mattered was that his family owned properties all over the country, plus a few overseas. One of those properties was a lake house, not a cabin, not a cottage. A full-scale, modern lake house sitting on a private road beside a secluded lake somewhere in the northern United States. I'm not going to say the exact state, but think dense forests, quiet wealth, and the kind of places you only find by accident or invitation. The lake itself wasn't massive, but it was wide enough that swimming across it would absolutely wreck you. You could see the houses on the far side, but they felt distant, like they belonged to another world. James's parents were almost never there. That house sat empty most of the year, which meant James effectively had unlimited access. He threw parties there sometimes, big ones, because most of the surrounding houses were vacation homes owned by people who barely used them. No neighbors, no noise complaints, no consequences. But this night wasn't like that. It was just the two of us. I had recently gone through a rough breakup. 3 years, gone. I was angry, numb, and restless all at the same time. James knew I needed to get out of my own head, so he invited me up for a quiet night at the lake. No party, no chaos, just beers, a dock, and open water. There's something different about being on a lake at night. It doesn't feel like the ocean or the beach. It feels private, isolated, like you're part of a secret that most of the world doesn't get to see. We sat at the edge of the dock with our feet dangling over the water, drinking and talking about nothing important. The sky was clear. The water was calm. Most of the houses across the lake were dark and lifeless, their massive structures reduced to silhouettes. That's when I noticed the light. At first, I didn't think anything of it. I assumed it was the sun reflecting off a window at just the right angle. But then it happened again. And again. A sharp flash from across the lake. I tilted my head, thinking it was just my eyes adjusting, but the light stayed. It blinked on, off, on again. Deliberate. I pointed it out to James. We both watched in silence as the light continued. It wasn't random. It followed a pattern. 3 short flashes, 3 longer ones, 3 short again. James snapped his fingers like something clicked in his brain. "That's Morse code," he said. I laughed and asked him since when he knew Morse code. He said he didn't, but he knew that pattern. SOS. I didn't believe him until I checked my phone. He was right. The light continued for another minute, repeating the same pattern over and over before suddenly stopping. The lake went dark again. We just sat there, staring across the water, neither of us wanting to say what we were thinking. Someone could be in trouble. James immediately said we should call the police. I reminded him we'd been drinking and that neither of us was legal yet. On top of that, I was already dealing with a DUI charge at the time. The idea of calling the cops made my stomach turn. He wasn't happy about it. We tried to rationalize it. If someone was in danger, why wouldn't they just call for help? Why use Morse code? Why that house? We talked ourselves into thinking it might be nothing, but neither of us truly believed that. In the end, curiosity and stupidity won. We decided to check it out ourselves. If it was serious, we'd call the police afterward. Driving around the lake wasn't an option, for obvious reasons. So we dragged James's dad's kayak down to the water. At first we laughed. It felt like an adventure, something we'd tell people later. But the farther we paddled from the dock, the quieter we became. The sun dipped lower. The air cooled. The water around us turned black. By the time we were halfway across the lake, neither of us was smiling anymore. That's when the house came fully into view. It was big, like the others, but wrong. Neglected. The dock was half collapsed, sunken into the water at an unnatural angle. No lights were on now. No movement. The flashing had stopped. We beached the kayak on the rocky shore instead of tying it to the dock. I felt my heart rate spike as my shoes scraped against the stones. The light had come from the second floor. We were sure of that. James whispered that we should leave. I reminded him we'd have to paddle all the way back just to call for help anyway. No cell service, no signal. Against his better judgment, and mine, we approached the house. We didn't go through the front door. We circled the building until we found a window that wasn't locked. Inside, the house felt wrong immediately. Not abandoned, emptied. No furniture, no personal items, no dust patterns where things used to be. Just bare walls and floors. It didn't feel like someone had moved out. It felt like no one had ever lived there. We moved slowly, every sound amplified in the emptiness. The stairs creaked under our weight as we climbed to the second floor. The hallway was dark, silent. I pressed my ear to the door at the end, the room we believed the light came from. Nothing. I opened it. Inside, the room was empty, except for one thing. An old projector. It was positioned directly at the window, pointed outward, at the lake, at us. The realization hit me all at once. This wasn't a distress signal, it was bait. James bolted. He didn't say a word, just turned and sprinted down the hallway. I followed immediately. As we ran down the stairs, I heard a door slam open behind us. Fast footsteps. Heavy, not hiding anymore. We burst through the window and ran toward the shore. That's when James stopped. The kayak was gone. I turned just in time to see someone running toward us from the side of the house. Big. Fast. Too fast. James jumped into the lake without hesitation. I followed. The water stole my breath instantly. It felt like knives against my skin. My arms burned. My legs screamed. We swam toward the faint lights of James's house, which felt impossibly far away. I don't know how long it took. All I know is that we made it. We dragged ourselves onto the dock, shaking violently, teeth chattering. Inside, we locked every door and called the police. It took nearly an hour for them to arrive. They crossed the lake. They searched the house. When they came back, they told us exactly what I feared. No one there. No signs of anyone. The house had been abandoned for years. They didn't believe us. James's parents were furious. I was never invited back. I still don't know who was in that house. I don't know how they got there. I don't know how long they had been watching the lake. But I know one thing. That light wasn't asking for help. It was waiting for an answer. And the lake answered back. When I moved into my new place, I wasn't chasing success, comfort, or status. I was running. I won't get into every detail, but my last relationship ended in a way that made staying in my old city impossible. It wasn't just emotional damage. It was the kind of situation where memories, people, and places all felt hostile. I had made money early in life, more than someone my age probably should have. And with that money came bad decisions, especially about the kind of people I trusted. So when I found a quiet neighborhood far away from all that, it felt like a reset button. The area was picture-perfect America. Low crime, wide streets, tall trees, mostly families. The kind of place where people jog in the mornings and kids ride bikes without supervision. Houses were expensive, but tasteful. Not flashy, just quietly wealthy. What really sold me was the spacing. Most properties were set far apart, separated by long driveways, fences, and carefully landscaped yards. Privacy without isolation, except for one house. The property directly next to mine was much closer than the rest. Close enough that from certain angles, it felt like it was looming over my place. And that house was massive, easily the biggest on the block. When I first saw it, I assumed a large extended family lived there. Parents, kids, grandparents, maybe even relatives visiting from out of state. I could not have been more wrong. Even though I wanted to keep a low profile, I didn't want to be that guy, the quiet stranger who never introduces himself. So over the course of a few days, I went door to door meeting the neighbors. They were exactly what you'd expect. Friendly, polite, slightly intimidating in that effortless, successful suburban way. Most of them had young kids, dual-income households, clean cars, well-kept lawns. I felt out of place. By the time I made it to the house next door, my social battery was completely drained. But I knew if I didn't do it then, I'd probably never do it at all. So I walked up the driveway. I expected someone middle-aged to answer. Instead, the door opened to a guy who looked younger than me. He had a mullet, not ironic, not styled, just there. He looked relaxed, almost too relaxed, like someone who didn't worry about fitting in. I recovered quickly and went through my new-to-the-neighborhood speech. Before I could even finish, he cut me off with a huge smile. Man, I was starting to think I was the only one here born in this decade. I laughed, genuinely relieved. I told him how weird it felt being a single guy in my late 20s surrounded by families. He waved it off and told me most people around here kept to themselves anyway. He introduced himself as Damon. He said I should come by for a drink sometime. Half joking, half serious, I said. Why not now?" I expected him to laugh. Instead, he glanced over his shoulder into the house, like he was checking something, then turned back and said he couldn't. He was working. I asked what he did. His smile faded just a little. After a pause, he said, "Finance." That was it. No elaboration. It felt rehearsed. I asked if he had roommates. He told me he lived there alone. That didn't sit right. The house was enormous. We talked a few more minutes. He gave me his number. Then he went back inside. At the time, I felt lucky. Someone my age. Someone normal. But even then, something felt off. That was about 6 months ago. For weeks, nothing happened. I tried texting Damon a few times to hang out. He always apologized, said he was busy, said we'd do something soon. Eventually, I stopped trying. What bothered me more was that I never saw anyone go in or out of his house. No visitors, no parties, no deliveries. His car was always in the driveway. Always. I work from home, and my office is on the 3rd floor. From my desk, I could see most of Damon's property without even trying. I know it sounds creepy, but it was impossible not to notice. The guy lived like a ghost. Then came the night everything changed. It was a Wednesday. I remember that clearly. I woke up around 2 a.m. to loud music. My windows were open, so the sound carried easily. At first, I thought I was dreaming. Then I looked outside. 7 or 8 cars were lined up in Damon's driveway. He was throwing a party. In the middle of the week, the music was loud, louder than anything I'd heard since moving in. I figured I'd go over and ask him to turn it down. I threw on a hoodie and walked next door. From outside, it sounded like a full-blown party. I knocked. Nothing. I knocked again, harder. Still nothing. I tried the handle. The door swung open. Inside, there was a pile of shoes in the foyer, at least 10 pairs. But the house was empty. No people, no drinks, no movement. The noise continued. Then it clicked. It wasn't music. It was a recording. Laughing, talking, glasses clinking. A fake party. That's when I realized something was very, very wrong. I should have left. Instead, I followed the sound. A door near the back of the house was slightly open. It led to the basement. I don't know why, but I knew that whatever this was, it was down there. The stairs were dark. A faint light glowed from deeper inside. Then I heard another sound beneath the fake party noise. A heavy, mechanical grinding, like industrial equipment. I crept closer. Through the crack in a door, I saw them. 3 older men, heavy work clothes, protective goggles, thick rubber gloves, work boots. They were staring at something I couldn't see. Then the smell hit me. Bleach. Strong. Overwhelming. My stomach dropped. I turned to leave. That's when the light behind me went out. I ran. I made it back to my house, locked everything, and watched from my window. Men poured out of Damon's house. Older men, arguing, scanning the street. Damon wasn't with them. The music stopped. By morning, all the cars were gone, including Damon's. He never came back. My neighbors claimed they never heard a thing. Packages still sit on his porch. The grass keeps growing. And sometimes, late at night, I swear I hear something mechanical humming through the walls. I don't know what they were doing. I don't know who Damon really was. And I don't know if that house was ever meant to be lived in. The only thing I know is this. That party wasn't meant for guests. It was meant to hide something. And whatever it was, it wasn't finished. My name is Caleb Morgan. I'm 28 years old, and this happened in the spring of 2026. After my divorce, I didn't have much left tying me to the city. My ex kept the apartment, most of the furniture, and whatever sense of normalcy I thought I had. I needed somewhere quiet, somewhere cheap, and more than anything, somewhere familiar. That's how I ended up driving south into a forgotten stretch of rural Alabama, to a house my grandfather left behind when he passed. The town was called Ridgeway Crossing, barely more than a gas station, a diner, and a sheriff's office that closed early. My grandfather's property sat about 10 minutes outside town, down a narrow road that turned to gravel and then dirt. 10 acres of land, thick woods on all sides, no neighbors close enough to see your porch light. At first, it felt peaceful. Too peaceful. The house itself was old, real old. Pine floors that groaned under your weight. Doors that never quite lined up with their frames. The kind of house that always felt cold, even when the heater was running. The air smelled faintly of dust and damp wood, like it had been holding its breath for decades. But it was free. And after the divorce, free mattered more than comfort. The first few nights were quiet. I unpacked slowly, cleaned the place room by room, and tried to convince myself this was a fresh start. In the evenings, I'd sit on the front porch with a beer, listening to the wind moving through the trees. Sometimes an owl would call out from the woods, sometimes nothing at all. No traffic, no people, just darkness pressing in from every direction. I slept fine the first week. The 7th night is when everything changed. It was just after midnight. I'd crawled into bed and was drifting off when I heard it. Whistling. At first, I thought I was dreaming. It was faint, almost lost beneath the sound of insects outside. But it was there. A slow, broken tune. Not a song I recognized. The notes were off, dragging, uneven. Like someone who didn't quite know how to whistle properly. It sounded like it was coming from the woods behind the house. I lay there, staring at the ceiling, trying to reason it away. Maybe a hunter. Maybe someone drunk wandering home through the trees. The thought made my skin crawl, but I told myself it wasn't impossible. Eventually, the whistling faded. I fell asleep. The next night, it happened again. Same tune, same tempo, same time, but closer. I sat up in bed and listened. This time, it sounded like whoever was whistling was walking slowly, deliberately, circling the property. I got up, turned on the porch light, and looked through the window. Nothing. No movement. No flashlight beam. No silhouette. I grabbed a flashlight and stepped outside anyway. The air felt thick, like the woods were watching me. I scanned the yard, the trees, the edge of the property. Nothing. Then, from somewhere deeper in the woods, the whistling resumed, growing quieter as it moved away. I didn't sleep much after that. Over the next few nights, the pattern became impossible to ignore. The whistling always started between 1:15 and 1:20 a.m. Not earlier. Not later. Like clockwork. And each night it was closer. Sometimes it came from the tree line. Sometimes from near the old shed behind the house. Once, from the side of the porch. I started locking everything. Windows, doors, even the bedroom door, though it felt stupid doing it. I told myself I was being paranoid, but deep down, I knew something wasn't right. After a week of this, I called the sheriff's office. An older deputy came out. Gray hair, tired eyes. I'll call him Deputy Ross. He listened quietly as I explained what I'd been hearing. When I finished, he didn't laugh. He didn't dismiss it. Instead, he got quiet. Then he said something that made my stomach drop. "Your grandfather used to call about this. I stared at him. He told me my grandfather had reported the same whistling for years. Always in the spring, always late at night, always around the property. They'd never found anyone. No tracks. No suspects. Deputy Ross admitted they'd assumed my grandfather was just lonely after my grandmother died. But now you're hearing it, he said. That's concerning. Before he left, he told me to stay inside after dark and keep everything locked. That night, the whistling came from behind the shed. It was louder than it had ever been, close enough that I could hear breath between the notes. I didn't go outside. I watched through the blinds, heart pounding, waiting to see a shape move in the darkness. Nothing. The next night, it came from the porch. 3 long whistles, then silence. The night after that, it came from under the house. I woke up to the sound vibrating through the floorboards, soft, muffled, like it was coming from the crawl space. The vents carried the sound into the rooms. It felt like the house itself was whistling. I didn't sleep at all. The next day, I went into the attic and found my grandfather's old journals. He'd written about the whistling, about sitting up at night with a rifle by the door, about feeling watched, about how it only ever happened when he lived alone. I called Deputy Ross again. He read the journals and shook his head. "Don't open the door," he told me. "Not for anyone you're not expecting." That night, I stayed awake. I sat on the couch with a shotgun I barely knew how to use. The house creaked and shifted around me. Every sound made my nerves jump. At 1:17 a.m., the whistling started. But not outside. It came from the hallway. I froze. The hallway light was off. The sound moved slowly, step by step, closer to the living room. I stood up, aimed the shotgun, and shouted. The whistling stopped. I turned on the hallway light. Nothing was there. 2 nights passed without incident. I almost convinced myself it was over. On the 3rd night, I went to bed just after midnight. I left the hallway light on. At exactly 1:17 a.m., I woke up to knocking. 3 slow knocks from inside the house. A minute later, I heard footsteps. The hallway light went out. At the end of the hallway, I saw a figure, black clothing, pale face, standing perfectly still. I raised the shotgun and screamed. The figure turned and ran. I fired once into the darkness. The next morning, the front door was unlocked. Deputy Ross told me to change the locks, and off the record, to leave. I did both. I've never gone back. What you're about to hear is the kind of experience that doesn't just scare you in the moment. It crawls into your head and stays there. Even now, weeks later, I still replay it in my mind at random times. I'll be driving, working, or lying in bed, and suddenly I'm right back there again, heart pounding, waiting for something that never fully explained itself. I've recovered enough to talk about it now, but I don't think I'll ever fully be over it. I'm a single man in my mid-30s, living alone in the United States, in a quiet suburban area just outside a mid-sized city in the Midwest. I won't name the exact town, but it's the kind of place people move to because nothing ever happens there. Clean streets, small yards, one-story houses that all look vaguely similar. My house is modest. 1 bedroom, 1 bathroom, a living room that opens into a small dining area, a kitchen just big enough to cook in without bumping into everything, and a tiny attached garage that barely fits my car. No pets, no roommates, no partner. And honestly, I loved it that way. Because of the work I do, I don't have a boss breathing down my neck, or a schedule that controls my life. I work when I want, sleep when I want, and answer to no one. That kind of freedom has always been important to me. Some people need structure. I never did. I know a lot of people would look at my lifestyle and call it immature. No wife, no kids, no routine. But everyone has different priorities. Mine has always been independence. As long as no one judges me, I don't judge them. That freedom does come with downsides. One of the biggest ones is my sleep schedule. It's awful. For some reason, my brain works best when the world is asleep. Late nights are when I'm most productive. So I often stay up until 4 or 5 in the morning and sleep into the afternoon. It's not healthy, but it's what my body naturally does. And until recently, it never caused me any problems. Until that night. It was well past 3 a.m. I was sitting at my desk in the bedroom, working on my computer. No music, no TV, no background noise. Just me, my thoughts, and the soft clicking of my keyboard. I was completely locked in, what people call the zone. The house was silent. Not quiet, but dead silent. No air conditioning kicking on. No pipes knocking. No cars passing by outside. Just nothing. And then, without warning, the silence exploded. Heavy footsteps came pounding down the hallway toward my bedroom. Not slow footsteps. Not hesitant ones. Fast. Aggressive. Like someone sprinting. Before my brain could even process what I was hearing, there were 3 or 4 violent bangs on my bedroom door. Not knocks. Bangs. The kind of bangs you'd expect from police trying to force entry. The kind that make the entire door frame shudder. I shot up from my chair so fast I slammed my knee into the desk and sent my monitor crashing to the floor. Pain didn't even register. My body was running purely on shock. Imagine being alone in your house at 3 in the morning, in complete silence, and suddenly someone charges at your bedroom door like they're trying to break it down. That's the most terrified I've ever been in my life. I stood there, frozen, staring at the door. I was convinced the next thing I'd hear would be the door bursting open. Someone rushing into the room. Me having to fight a stranger in total darkness with nothing but instinct. But it didn't happen. There were no more bangs, no footsteps running away. Nothing. Just silence again. It felt impossible, like my brain had invented the whole thing. But I knew I hadn't imagined it. I could still feel the vibration in my chest from the impact of the door. I don't know how long I stood there, but I physically could not move. My body refused. It was like sleep paralysis, except I was wide awake. Then, finally, I heard something. Footsteps. Not running this time. Walking. Slowly moving away from my bedroom, back down the hallway. That sound snapped something in my head. Without thinking, I grabbed an empty beer bottle off my desk, yanked the door open, and ran into the hallway screaming like a madman. I don't even remember what I was yelling. I think I just needed noise, needed to feel powerful instead of helpless. I tore through the house, living room, kitchen, bathroom, garage, every light on, every corner checked. No one. The house is small, there's nowhere to hide. And yet I was completely alone. Every door was locked, every window was locked. Nothing was broken. That's when the fear came rushing back in full force. I ran back to my bedroom, locked the door, and called the police. When the officers arrived, we searched the house together. They were calm. Too calm. They didn't find anything either. One of them suggested the person must have left before I chased them. I told him that was impossible. Everything had been locked. He said I probably overlooked something. I wanted to scream at him. For the next week, my mind was shattered. I barely slept. I barely ate. Every noise made me jump. I replayed the event over and over, trying to make sense of it. To this day, I still don't know how someone ran through my house at 3 a.m. and vanished without a trace. And that uncertainty is the scariest part. I work for a property preservation company. It's not the kind of job people dream about when they're kids, but it pays well enough to keep the lights on. And most days, it's quiet. Almost too quiet. My job is simple on paper. We're sent to foreclosed homes, places banks now own after people lose everything. We secure them, clean them out, winterize them. Sometimes board them up if there's been vandalism or break-ins. You spend a lot of time alone, standing inside houses that used to be someone's entire life. You see traces of people everywhere, old photos left behind, furniture nobody wanted, calendars still hanging on walls, stopped on some meaningless month from years ago. Most of the time, it's just sad. But every once in a while, you get a house that doesn't just feel empty, it feels wrong. This happened in 2020, back when the world already felt like it was quietly unraveling. I was assigned to a property in rural upstate New York. Not the scenic tourist version. This was deep, dying country. One gas station, a diner that only opened some mornings, roads cracked, weeds pushing through asphalt like the land was trying to reclaim itself. The house sat at the end of a dirt road, surrounded on 3 sides by dense woods. No neighbors close enough to see. No traffic noise, just trees and wind. According to the file, the homeowner was an elderly woman who passed away alone. No heirs, no family came forward. Utilities had been shut off for over a year. The place had been sitting untouched. I arrived around 9 a.m. on a Monday with a small box truck and my equipment. From the outside, the house looked intact, windows closed, roof solid. Front porch sagging slightly, choked with vines and overgrowth. The front door stuck in the frame when I tried to open it. Swollen wood. I had to lean my shoulder into it before it finally creaked open. Inside, the air was stale. Dust, old fabric, and something faintly metallic I couldn't place. The house was quiet in that heavy way, like sound didn't want to travel. I stepped inside, and that's when my work phone rang. That alone wouldn't have been strange, except I had no signal out there. I'd checked when I parked. 0 bars. The screen lit up anyway. Unknown caller. I stared at it for a second before answering. Hello? Nothing. Just a low crackling sound, like distant static. I said hello again. No response. I hung up, uneasy, but chalked it up to a glitch. Rural areas do weird things to electronics. I started my routine. Photos first. Every room, every angle. The living room was cluttered with heavy furniture, lace curtains, framed landscapes, porcelain figurines. It reminded me of my grandmother's house, the kind of place that smelled like dust and time. The hallway felt different. The smell was stronger there. Mildew. Dust. And that metallic edge again. 3 bedrooms branched off it. One was almost empty, just a sagging mattress on the floor. Another was clearly a sewing room. Spools of thread scattered everywhere. A machine frozen mid-project. On one wall was a corkboard. I stepped closer. It was covered in newspaper clippings, obituaries, dozens of them. Carefully cut out and pinned in neat rows. All local names, all different dates. I didn't recognize any of them. I took my photos and moved on. In the master bedroom, I stopped short. On the nightstand sat a rotary phone, off-white, yellowed with age, Long coiled cord. A phone that shouldn't work. The line had been cut long ago. I remember staring at it longer than I should have, feeling a strange pressure in my chest, like the room was watching me think. I moved on to the bathroom. That's when my phone rang again. Unknown caller. This time, I hesitated. I stepped back into the hallway and answered. Silence. Then, after about 5 seconds, I heard a whisper. So soft, I almost missed it. Don't answer the phone in the bedroom. The line went dead. I stood there frozen. The house was silent. No movement. No footsteps. No doors opening. I checked the windows. All closed. No sign of anyone outside. My first thought was a prank. It had to be. Someone messing with me. But no one knew I was there that early. And again, no signal. My phone flickered between one bar and nothing. I tried calling my supervisor. Call failed. I decided to finish as fast as possible. I started boxing items in the living room, but the feeling didn't leave. That sensation of being watched. Every time I glanced toward the hallway, I expected to see someone standing there. Then I heard it. A ringing. Not my phone. The rotary phone. Its shrill mechanical ring echoed through the house. That phone should not have worked. I walked slowly down the hallway. Each step felt deliberate, like the house was waiting for me. The phone rang again. I stopped in the doorway. The receiver trembled slightly with each ring. I didn't pick it up. Eventually, the ringing stopped. I backed away. I wanted to leave, but I still had to check the basement. The basement door was in the kitchen. I opened it and the smell hit me. Mold, rust, damp earth. I descended with my flashlight. In the back corner sat a small table. On it was a cordless phone, newer model, covered in dust. Beside it were yellowed notebooks. I picked one up. Each page had a name, a date, a note. Rang once. Didn't answer. Picked up. Warned him. Dozens of entries. My stomach dropped. I rushed upstairs and left. 2 days later, another crew member went out there. He texted me. The phone rang in the bedroom. No service. What the hell? He quit the next day. Police found nothing. That house is still out there. And sometimes I wonder who was making the calls and who they were warning us about. I was 10 years old when my life split cleanly into 2 parts. Before that house and after it. My mother had recently remarried, and with a new marriage came a bigger family and the need for more space. My stepfather, Marcus, had found a house outside our old neighborhood, farther from the city and closer to wooded land. The address was on Alder Creek Road, a quiet stretch in the outskirts of Oregon, where the houses sat far apart and tall trees leaned over the streets like silent watchers. From the outside, the house looked perfect. 2 stories, gray siding, a wide front porch, big windows that reflected the sky. It was newer than the cramped place we lived in before, and everyone kept telling me how lucky I was to have my own room now. I remember standing in the driveway the first day, staring at the house, and thinking that this was supposed to be a fresh start. A bigger place, a new family, a better life. I didn't know then that some houses don't let you start fresh. They just wait for you to move in. My bedroom was at the very end of the upstairs hallway. It had 2 large windows facing the backyard and a deep closet that ran farther back than it should have. The closet felt wrong somehow. Even during the day, it stayed dark inside no matter how wide the door was open. The first night we slept there, I tried to ignore the uneasy feeling in my stomach. New house noises are normal, I told myself. Pipes, air vents, wood settling. I fell asleep with the hallway light on. Sometime around midnight, I woke up. At first, I didn't know what had disturbed me. Then I heard it, a soft, shuffling sound coming from inside my closet. It wasn't loud. It sounded like fabric brushing against fabric, like someone gently moving coats on a hanger. I stared at the closet door, holding my breath. The sound stopped. Just as I started convincing myself I had imagined it, the closet door shivered, not opening, not slamming. Just a small, unnatural vibration, like something had pressed lightly against it from the inside. My heart hammered so hard, I thought it might wake the entire house. I wanted to run. I wanted to scream, but my body refused to move. I stayed frozen, staring at that door until exhaustion finally dragged me back into sleep. In the morning, the closet door was slightly open. I knew for a fact I had closed it. When I asked my mom about it, she brushed it off. She said air pressure could do weird things in houses. She smiled when she said it, like she was trying to keep everything normal. But I knew it wasn't the air. After that night, sleep became something I dreaded. A few days later, the tapping started. At first it was faint, a light, rhythmic tapping on my window glass. I assumed it was tree branches until I actually looked outside. There were no branches anywhere near my windows. The tapping would last for minutes, sometimes longer. And the strangest part was this. The moment I pulled my blanket over my head, the sound stopped. One night, I forced myself to look. Pressed against the outside of my second-floor window was a pale hand. Not banging, not scratching, just resting there. Still. It stayed like that for what felt like forever, before slowly sliding downward and disappearing out of sight. I didn't sleep at all that night. When I told my mom, she laughed. Not cruelly, nervously, like someone trying to break tension. She said I was probably half asleep, mixing dreams with reality. Marcus laughed too. He said I wanted attention. But I noticed something strange after that. Every night, the hallway light stayed on. No one admitted to being scared, but the house felt tense, like everyone was pretending nothing was wrong while quietly waiting for something else to happen. And something did. About a month after we moved in, my little brother Caleb, who was 4 at the time, started talking about someone he called the White Woman. He said she came into his room at night and sat on his bed. My mom said it was imagination. Kids make things up. Then one night, I heard Caleb screaming. I ran into his room and found him shaking under his blanket, sobbing so hard he could barely breathe. When he finally calmed down, he told me she had been standing by his door, just watching him. He said her eyes were all black. I believed him instantly. After that, the dreams started. I dreamed of the White Woman standing in the corner of my room, whispering my name. Her voice sounded dry, like dead leaves scraping together. Sometimes I would wake up and still hear it. One night, I opened my eyes and saw her standing at the foot of my bed. She was taller than any person I had ever seen. Her head nearly brushed the ceiling. Her white dress moved even though the air was completely still. Her hair hung in long black strands around her chalk-pale face. Her eyes were empty. Black. I tried to scream. Nothing came out. I squeezed my eyes shut. When I opened them again, she was gone. My closet door was wide open. The worst night happened during a violent storm. Wind slammed into the house. Rain pounded the roof. I woke up to the sound of my window creaking. The lock was turning by itself. The window slid open. She came in. She didn't walk. She floated. Her feet never touched the floor. She leaned over me, close enough that I could feel her cold breath on my face. She whispered my name. That's when I screamed. My parents rushed in. The window was closed, locked. She was gone. They said it was a night terror. But I know what I saw. We lived in that house for 3 more years. I never felt safe. Even now, during storms, I check the corners of rooms. I still don't like closets. I still remember that hand on the window. Some experiences don't fade. They just wait quietly inside you. This happened in early December 2 years ago, when I drove up into the mountains to visit an old friend I hadn't seen in years. For privacy reasons, I'll call him Scott. My name is Jeremy. Scott and I had been close friends since middle school. We weren't inseparable or anything, but we spent enough years together that I thought I really knew him. After graduation, life pulled us in different directions. I stayed in New York City, chasing work, deadlines, and the kind of stress that never really lets you sleep. Scott moved away with his family to a small mountain town upstate, somewhere tucked deep into the woods. We never argued. We never had a falling out. We just stopped talking. So when he messaged me out of nowhere, inviting me to visit for a weekend, it stirred up something nostalgic inside me. He said December was the best time, that the snow made everything quiet and peaceful. Rustic, he called it. I didn't realize then how strange it was that he sounded almost relieved that I agreed to come. The drive up took longer than expected. Snow had started falling earlier that afternoon, and by the time I left the main highway, the roads were icy and mostly empty. I drove slowly, gripping the steering wheel tighter than usual. There were barely any other cars around, and the trees grew denser the higher I climbed. By around 4 p.m., the sun was already gone. That early winter darkness felt heavier in the mountains. The sky wasn't just dark. It felt closed in, like something had sealed the world shut. When I finally reached Scott's town, it was pitch black except for a few porch lights scattered far apart. Scott lived on the side of the mountain in an older wooden house, set back from the road. A few other houses were nearby, but they were spread out enough that it didn't feel like a neighborhood. It felt isolated. Perfectly isolated. Scott came outside when he heard my car crunching into the driveway. He smiled when he saw me, but the smile didn't quite reach his eyes. The first thing I noticed was that something about him felt wrong. I hadn't seen him in years, so at first I blamed time. People change. But the longer he talked, the more uncomfortable I felt. His speech was slower, like he had to think hard about each sentence. Sometimes he would pause mid-thought, staring past me as if he'd forgotten why he started talking in the first place. Inside, the house was warm, uncomfortably warm, but mostly empty. There was a couch, a table, a couple of chairs, and some antique-looking wall decorations that didn't really match anything else. The place felt lived in, but barely. He told me I could sleep on the pull-out couch. Across from it was a long, narrow hallway that stretched into darkness. It led to a bathroom and 2 guest rooms. The doors at the end were open, and there was no light back there. From the couch, it looked like a black tunnel carved straight into the house. I don't know why, but it made my skin crawl. That first night, we tried to catch up. We talked about school, old teachers, people we used to know, but it felt forced. Scott barely made eye contact, and I kept catching him glancing toward the hallway, like he was listening for something. When it was time to sleep, he went upstairs to his bedroom. I pulled out the couch and left a small lamp on near the hallway. I felt stupid doing it, but the darkness back there felt wrong. Sometime around 2 a.m., I woke up. At first, I thought I was dreaming. Then I heard it. Fast footsteps above me. Not walking. Running. It sounded like someone sprinting back and forth across the upstairs floor. The footsteps went on for about 20 seconds, then stopped abruptly. No door opened. No stairs creaked. Just silence. I eventually convinced myself it was Scott, pacing or having a nightmare. Eventually, I fell back asleep. The next day was worse. Scott barely spoke. He didn't eat much. When I asked if he was okay, he just nodded. Throughout the day, I saw him walk down that dark hallway multiple times. I never heard the bathroom door close. Never heard it flush. That night, a snowstorm rolled in hard. Wind slammed into the house. The walls creaked. I actually liked it. Being snowed in felt cozy, at least at first. Around 2 a.m., I woke up again. This time, I heard scraping sounds coming from the hallway. It sounded like something dragging across the wooden floor. Then, a single tap on the wall behind me. I stared into the darkness. I didn't get up. I just rolled over and forced myself to sleep. By the third night, I felt like a guest in a place I wasn't welcome. Scott kept staring at me too long, like he was checking whether I'd noticed something. I considered leaving early, but the snowstorm hadn't stopped. That night, I woke up and realized I couldn't move. Sleep paralysis. My eyes drifted toward the hallway. Scott was standing there, or at least something that looked like him. He stood perfectly still at the end of the hall, his face swallowed by darkness. I tried to speak. Nothing came out. I couldn't even breathe properly. After what felt like an eternity, he slowly turned and walked into one of the guest rooms. I regained control of my body and forced myself to follow. Inside the room, I saw someone standing by the window, facing outside. I ran upstairs. Scott was asleep in his bed. When I asked him who was downstairs, he shrugged. That was when I left. As I drove away, I made the mistake of looking back. In the window at the end of the hallway, I saw a silhouette, watching me leave. Scott stopped responding after that weekend. Whatever lives in that house, it wasn't him anymore.